We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis in Meseches Gitin. This is Gittin Daf 47b. On the previous summer, there was a machlokas amoraim. If a non-Jew owns land in Eretz Yisrael, is that land chayiv in Meiser? And the Gemara is now in the middle of bringing a proof from a Tosefta. The Tosefta is talking about a case where a Jew and a non-Jew own the land in partnership. And the first opinion, Tevel v'chulin mu'uravin zeh bozeh divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says that what happens in this case is that you have Tevel and chulin that are all mixed up, one with the other. Rashi explains Tevel v'chulin mu'uravin. Ein lecha kol chita v'chita shein chetzia tevel v'chetzia chulin. In other words, there's no piece of wheat that isn't considered half tevel and half chulin, meaning a portion of it is chayiv in meiser, that's the Yisrael's portion, and a portion of it is not chayiv in meiser, that's the non-Jew's portion. Shechelak ovad kochavim pater, because the portion that belongs to the ovad kochavim, that's going to be pater. Again, that's Rebbe's opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Shal ovad kochavim pater, that which belongs to the non-Jew is pater, v'shal Yisrael chayiv, and that which belongs to the Jew is chayiv. And Rashi explains, Shal Yisrael chayiv la'achar shechilku, meaning after they divide it up, so essentially we say there's breira. We say retroactively, we see that this part belonged to the Jew, and this part belonged to the non-Jew. Havishal Yisrael tevel gomer. The part that belongs to the Jew is considered tevel gomer. U'ma'asr mimenu al achar. You're even allowed to take off meiser from there on other grain. It's considered bona fide tevel. U'ma'achar olav, and from other grain on it. The yesh breira, because according to this Tana, meaning Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, we say there's breira. V'shal ovad kochavim pater legarmi, and from the non-Jew it's totally pater. U'letanakama ein breira v'afil chilko b'sveika hein omden. And according to Tanakama, we don't say breira. Therefore, even after it's divided, it's still a suffix in terms of whether it's tevel or chulin. And so the Gemara now says, if this is the case, so adkan lo pligi ela demar savar yesh breira ma savar ein breira. The only machlokas between Rabbi and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is that one holds there is breira and one holds there's no breira. Avol dekuli alma yesh kinyan lo ovad kochavim beretz Yisrael afki miyad meiser. But everybody agrees that the ovad kochavim is considered to be making a kinyan in terms of getting rid of the chiyuv of meiser. And the Gemara answers, Hachanami, here also will give the same answer as before. Besuria, we're talking about in Syria. Bekasavar kivush yochid lo shmei kivush, and this Tosefta holds that the conquest of an individual is not considered a conquest, and therefore the chiyuvim of Meiser in Syria are only midrabanan, and since the chiyuvim are only midrabanan, so if a non-Jew owns the land, it will not be chayiv in Meiser. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chia bar Avin, Rav Chia bar Avin says, Tashma, come and hear a proof from our Mishnah. Hamocher sadei ulovid kochavim, if a person sells his field to a non-Jew, lokeach umevi bikurim ibnei tikun olam, he has to buy the fruits from that field and bring the first fruits, bring the bikurim, because of tikun olam, meaning for the betterment of the world. Ibnei tikun olam in midoraisa lo, so it sounds like it's only for the betterment of the world that he's bringing the bikurim. Otherwise, on a doraisa level, there is no chiyuv of bikurim. Why is there no chiyuv of bikurim? Apparently, the fact that the non-Jew owns it means there's no chiyuv. But the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Ashi says it's not necessarily a proof. Shtei takonas have. There were actually two different takonim midrabbanans in this regard. Meikara have a ma'isa midoraisa. Originally, there actually was a chiyuv on a doraisa level to bring bikurim. But kevan the chazu to come mikri mazavni to savri b'kedusha sayu kaiman. But then they saw that people would just sell the property to non-Jews because they thought if there's a chiyuv to bring bikurim, it must be the kedusha is still there. There's no issue to sell to non-Jews. The kedusha remains. So takinu lahu delole. So then they made a takana not to bring the bikurim. But kevan the chazu demandalo sagi le mizavin v'kam ishtakon biarov dekochavim. But then they saw that a person who needed money he would sell, and then the land again would be going to the non-Jews. So hadr takinu lahu delesu. So then they made another takana that actually they should bring the bikurim. And Rashi says, Mishtakon biarov dekochavim, everything would remain with the non-Jews. Shalo yachozer upoda, so the Jew would have no motivation to go and redeem the land. And so that's why takinu delaisu, they made a takana that they should bring the bikurim. Kadesha yitrach v'yiftenu, this way the Jew would go and he'd have a motivation, he'd have a reason to redeem the land back from the non-Jew. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, we have the following machlokas amoroim, hamocher sadeu leperus, if somebody sells his field for the fruits, meaning the person who's buying the field doesn't own the property, he just owns the property in terms of the fact that he can consume the fruits of that property. Rabbi Yochanan says, Mevi v'kori, the lokeach, he brings bikurim, and he can read from the parsha in the Torah about the bikurim. The point being over here, it's considered his land in terms of the reading from the psukim, because the psukim say, Me reishis priho adama asher nasat oli, from the first of the fruits that you gave to me, and he's considered the owner in this regard. Reish Lakish says, maybe he does bring the bikurim, ve'eno kore, however, he doesn't read from the parsha, because he's not considered to be the actual owner of the land. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mevi V'Kori. Rabbi Yochanan says he brings and he reads from the Parsha, Kinyan Peiros Kekinyan Haguf Dami. The reason is because acquiring the fruits of a land, it's like acquiring the land itself, and so therefore he's able to say the phrase, Me Reishis Pri Hadam Asher Nasatoli. Reish Lakish Amar Mevi Ve'eno Kore. Reish Lakish says he brings the fruits, but he doesn't read that portion from the Torah. Kinyan Peiros Lav Kekinyan Haguf Dami, because the fact that he has a Kinyan Peiros is not considered a Kinyan Haguf, so he cannot say the phrase, Me Reishis Pri Hadam Asher Nasatoli. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan l'Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan asks Reish Lakish the following question. Again, Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says that Kinyan Peiros is considered Kekinyan Aguf. It says, Ula veisecha, and from your house. Melamich adam mevi bikurei ishto v'kori. This part of the pasuk, or this word in the pasuk, teaches that a person brings the bikurim of his wife as well, and he reads from the parsha. This is talking about the property of nichsei melug. The husband is considered to have a Kinyan Peiros in the nichsei melug. He owns the property only in terms of the fruits from that property. And so you see from here, if he's bringing the bikurim of his wife and he reads from the parsha, apparently Kinyan Peiros is Kekinyan Aguf. Amar Lei, so Reish Lakish said back to him, Shani Hasam, it's different over there. Techsiv Ula Veisecha, because the pasuk says Ula Veisecha, there's a specific pasuk including Bikurei Ishto. Otherwise, we would not say Kinyan Peiros is Kekinyan Aguf. V'ika De'amri, there are those that say they have another version of this back and forth between Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Eisvei Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. The question actually went from Reish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish asks Rabbi Yochanan, Ula Veisecha. It says in the pasuk Ula Veisecha, Melamid Shadam Mevi Bikurei Ishto V'Korei. This teaches that a person brings the bikurim of his wife and he reads. And so Reish Lakish says, Hasamu dichsiv Ula Veisecha, only by the nichsei melug of the wife, because there's a special pasuk. Avol bi'al malo, but we can infer that in other situations, Kinyan Peiros is lav kekinyan aguf. So Amar Lei, so Rabbi Yochanan said back to Reish Lakish, Taima didi nami mehacha ka'amina. No, my entire reason comes from the pasuk Ula Veisecha. It teaches us something by nichsei melug, by the property of the nichsei melug, that Kinyan Peiros is kekinyan aguf in that situation, and we learn from there to all other situations that Kinyan Peiros is kekinyan aguf. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei, we have a question from the following brisa. Hayabah b'derech uvikurei ishto b'yado. If a husband is on the road and he has the bikurim of his wife in his possession, v'shama shemesa ishto, and he hears that his wife died, so now he becomes the full owner of the karka. Mevi v'korei, so then he brings the bikurim and he reads from the parsha. And so the Gemara says, Mesa in, it's only if she dies that he brings and he reads from the parsha. Lo Mesa lo, but it's not true if she doesn't die. Meaning to say, when he only had a Kinyan Peiros, apparently it's not Kekinyan Aguf. This is a question on Rabbi Yochanan. And the Gemara says, Hu adin daf agav de lo Mesa. The truth is that even if she would not have died, even in that situation, Rabbi Yochanan would say, the halacha would be the same. Kinyan Peiros would be Kekinyan Aguf. Mevi v'korei, he would bring and he would read from the parsha. So why is it that this brisa specifically has a case where his wife dies to tell us that he brings and he reads from the parsha? He always brings and reads from the parsha, even if she didn't die. And Rabbi Yochanan would explain, the brisa needed to specifically say that even in a situation where she died, he brings the bikurim and he reads from the parsha, because one might have thought, ligzor mishum de Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. We should make a gezerah here because it's similar to a case of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, where he says there is a problem of reading. And what was the case of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina? Diyomer Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, because Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina said, B'tsaron v'shigron b'yad shliach, if he collects the first fruits and he sends them with an agent, umeis shliach b'derech, and then the agent dies on the road, maybe ve'eno kori. So then the owner he can bring, but he's not allowed to read. Shenemar v'lakachta ve'vesa. It says that you take it and you bring it. It has to be that the taking and the bringing all happen with the same person, and therefore in this case Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says again, the person does not read from the parsha. And so you might have thought that in our case as well, when the husband is bringing it and originally as a Kinyan Peiros, and then it turns into a Kinyan Aguf, maybe that's also a problem, that it's not Lakicha v'Hava be'echad, Kamash Malon. And so that's what the Bryce is teaching, that even in a situation where the wife dies, it's not a problem of Lakicha v'Hava be'echad. And Rashi says, Ligzor mishum de Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, Damar Bo'in Lakicha v'Hava be'echad. Again, Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says, you need to have the taking and the bringing be with one person. V'achanami liboy Lakicha v'Hava be'echad Kamash Malon. Here also maybe, by the case of the husband, maybe you need Lakicha v'Hava be'echad. It's a problem when the wife dies. V'meis shliach b'derech, if the shliach dies on the road, this again is Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina's case. V'chazer ve'evian hu bi'atzmo, the agent dies, and so now the owner is the one that is bringing the first fruits. Maybe ve'eno kore, he brings but he does not read. And Rashi says, V'yefshar lomer she'hiviu shliach acher. You can't interpret this to mean that the shliach dies and gives it to another agent. Te'afilu lo meis shliach rishon eino kori. Because if, even in a situation where the first agent doesn't die, and the first agent is bringing the bikurim, he wouldn't read for sure. A shliach in general doesn't read from the parsha. The Tanano Isha v'tumtum v'androgenes v'hashliach. It says in the Mishnah that a shliach meviyin v'lo korna. Shliach is one of the people that brings and does not read she'ein yecholin lomer asher nasat li, because he's not able to say the phrase asher nasat li. And the Gemara continues, V'yazdul Taimayu and Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, they follow their opinions in a different machlokes, the Itmar, because we have the following machlokes Amoroim, Hamocher Sadeh, if somebody sells his field, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Memches Amud Aleph.